Hi, Dr. Christy McMullen here to spend a little time with you talking through how you can improve every single human interaction you have. So, whether you're talking to your 16-year-old about whether or not he should get a car right away, or you're having a conversation with your spouse, or you're leading 300 people through a training, all of the things that we're going to talk about throughout this series is truly going to help you improve those interactions. So, why should we bother improving interactions? Because people quit things that are not fun. So, we've got to make work fun. We've got to make our conversations and our interactions fun. Fun does not mean silly. Fun means that people are using their talents. Fun means that people are equipped to do whatever you're asking them to do well. Fun means laughter, but fun also means that you will remember what it is that you're doing. So, we're going to talk through all of that today. But before we jump into that, I need to tell you just this much about me. So, as I mentioned, my name is Christy, and I am a wife and a mother and friend and a daughter, all that good stuff. But ultimately, I'm an educator. I've spent the last 24 years in education. And during that time, I have actually spent the majority of it working with adults. So, although I started with high school kids, I transitioned to adults about 17 years ago. And in those 17 years, what I've learned is that if you make every interaction with those adults safe, logical, fun, and memorable, people will remember what you said and choose to come back for more. So, what I did is in 2020, I wrote a book called Learning Can Stick. And in this book, I go through all of the tips and tricks that I have learned over the last 24 years of how you get people to stay engaged, to get excited, to do what it is that you want them to do. So, as I mentioned, we're going to spend some time together. Today is really just going to be an overview of what it is that I think you can do to make your interactions more sticky in the best possible way, and figure out what it is that you need to adopt and change so that people do keep wanting to come back to you. Does that sound okay? So, let's go through this and figure out what we can learn together. So, I'm going to share my screen, and what you will see is the title of my company. I work for a company called AIM, and that stands for Analyze, Improve, Move. I believe that you can analyze what you're doing and figure out what needs to change, improve upon those things, and then move towards excellence. And that's personally, professionally, or otherwise. So let's aim together. We're going to improve all human interactions. That sounds like a tall order, but we're going to make it very palatable and very doable. So, how will we know that we accomplished what we set out to accomplish today? Well, the two things that I want you to think about is how can we increase job satisfaction? That can be you personally. How can I be more satisfied in my own job? Or it can be how can I make sure my employees feel satisfied in their job? Both will work. The other thing we're going to do is improve those human interactions. So, when you're dealing with your teenager or your 3-year-old or your spouse, those interactions are going to improve as well. We're going to just make you an all around awesome person. Does that sound okay? Might be kind of fun. So, as I say, analyze, improve, move, what we're going to do throughout this series is we're really going to think about what is it that I'm doing currently, right? That gap analysis concept. What am I doing right now that is definitely not hitting the mark that I'm trying to hit? What do I need to do to improve those systems? Because systems thinking is really what will get us to the point where we can indeed improve. And then how can I move towards that action? What action steps do I need to take? What goals do I need to set in order to get to the point where I am indeed moving towards my target, whatever my target is? So maybe you're listening to this as a first time HR rep and you're going, okay, I'm not sure how to get people to go in the direction I want them to go. Great. Maybe you're a CEO who just wants to get better at communicating with your people. Great. Maybe you are a really successful business person in your current field, but you're getting ready to venture out on your own and you want your speeches to be better, or you want your presentations to have pizzazz. We're going to talk about all of those things, and you're going to have a chance to really think through what it is you want to do. So I want you to do me a favor, and I want you to set yourself up for success. Maybe you're a note taker and you want to have a place that you can write this stuff down. Maybe you want to type what you're going to do, or maybe maybe you just want to listen. This is something you can listen to over and over again. So I'm going to say a whole lot of things and give you a whole lot of nuggets of wisdom that I think that you can use right away, but I want you to be able to capture them. So take just a moment. If you need to press pause, do, and just come up with a note-taking system that's going to work for you. I have given you a sheet that you can follow along with if that's helpful. So go ahead and download it, and here we go. So I want you to think for just a second about this or that experience. So let's pretend that we're all physically together. We're together here online, but we're not physically together. Let's pretend we were physically together. And if we were, we would be moving from side to side throughout the room. You would go from this side to that side. But for right now, what I want you to do is put in the chat your this or that. Are you this or are you that? Are you ready? First one, are you a coffee drinker or a tea drinker? So think about that for a second. Tell me what you are. I see lots of coffees. I see fewer teas. I'm a tea, if anything, person. I'm really more of a water drinker, right? Like boring. Believe it or not, I do not do caffeine. I know that probably shocks several of you, but let's think about it. Coffee or tea? Got your idea? Okay, so you now know who your people are, right? Because there are lots of coffees or lots of teas in the chat. Next one, introvert or extrovert? Let's think about that. Let's think about it in a social setting, right? Would you prefer to be home reading a book, or do you need other humans in order to be satisfied? I, again, shocking, am 100% extrovert. On any test, I think the lowest I've ever gotten was like 97% extrovert. I love people. People energize me. It's important that you know which you are. Like my husband, for example, is a ambivert, if you will, because he's an extrovert anywhere social, but he needs to recharge by himself. Where I am an extrovert socially and I recharge with people. So it's really hard for me to just sit quietly and have a day off. I don't do that very well. So do you have that in mind? You got it? Okay, so coffee or tea, introvert or extrovert? This is a good one. Would you rather travel or stay home? Tell me in the chat, would you rather travel or stay home? I think after the pandemic, we all realized that we need to get out some. But some of us really do enjoy that quiet, that solitude, that predictability of home, and others really need to travel. So go ahead and get that in your head too. And then last but not least, food choice. Oh, this one's tough. Now, I'm gonna ask you to frame it this way. You might like all of those things, but I want you to think about the one that if you could only eat that for the rest of your life, that would be the one. For me, it's tacos, most definitely. But pizza, tacos, ramen, or burgers, do you want to put that in the chat for me too? And again, these are your people. So we're going to take just a moment to go into breakout rooms. And if you're listening to this in a recording, don't panic. That's okay. I want you to think for a moment about what you might talk about in those breakout rooms. But for my friends that are going to the breakout rooms, here's what I want you to talk about. I want you to talk about why it's important when we're trying to improve human interactions that we kick things off with something like a this or that. Are you coffee or tea? Are you introvert, extrovert? What is it that you prefer? So as you go into those breakout rooms, why did this crazy lady ask me all these questions that seem completely irrelevant to what we're talking about, but told me who my people are? Why is that helpful? So go ahead, you're going to spend about 10 minutes in those breakout rooms, see if you can't come up with something genius. Welcome back. I want you to throw some love in the chat for your friends and say, hey, thank you so much for your thinking. Let me explain to you why we did that. It is so important that you spend a little bit of time thinking about what is it that I have in common with others. When you walk into, let's say you're a real estate agent and you walk into a conversation with a brand new client, the very first thing you have to do is find some common ground. Do you have kids? Tell me a little bit about yourself. Taking that moment to get to know each other and figure out what you have in common levels the playing field. So that's super important. Another reason is just to break the ice. You don't know these people very well, and yet you need to because you're getting ready to do some interacting with them. So when you are in a brand brand new situation where you are spending a little time with people you don't know very well, the very first thing you need to do is break that ice. Now, it doesn't mean you have to be silly. And I know for some of you, particularly my introverted friends, right this minute you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to break out into a sweat if she says we have to do an icebreaker. I get it. But icebreakers do serve their purpose. They give everybody the opportunity to just be together. We need that. We need that human interaction. So that's kind of step one. So, why did we do that, this or that? We took the time to find out what we had in common so that we realized that even though we're awfully unique, we're not all that different. And it's important that we find that common ground. So that's actually kind of step one to creating safety within your interactions. So there are four things that you've got to do. You've got to make every interaction safe, logical, fun, and memorable. We're going to start with safe. What can you do to make your interactions and environment safe? What are some things that I did already? Well, I introduced myself. I let you know that I'm a mom and that I'm a wife and that I'm a human, right? And I definitely, if we were physically together, would have learned all of your names. We would have spent time in just interacting. Oh, hi, Susan, it's so nice to meet you. Tell me a little bit about you. Tell me something I need to know. It is incredibly important that you are transparent with who you are right up front. It doesn't matter what the interaction is. If people don't feel both physically and psychologically safe, they are not going to experience you well at all. So here are a couple examples of some things that you can do. You can learn people's names. Gosh, is that important? I had a conversation recently with a real estate agent, and that was the thing he took away. And I said, hold on, you're doing sometimes as much as $1 million transaction with these people, and you don't know their names? What are you doing? You've got to learn names. That is so incredibly critically important. And yet we tend to not do it, right? So, how can you very strategically start learning people's names right away, whether it's somebody that you're working with or somebody that you're just interacting with for a little while? Please take the time to learn people's names. Another one is to build relationships with and among your staff. So you can't just assume that people know how to work together. You need to create space for them to know a little bit more personally about each other so that they can stay together professionally. What are some ways that you can do that? Well, you can do some team building activity. You can have a meeting where the sole purpose is to get to know one another. You can create a this or that for your team, but you definitely want to take the time to build relationships so that people can work together. You can't really work with somebody until you kind of know where they're coming from. The be accessible part, if you're one of my CEO friends or you are a leader within your organization or within your home, you need to be accessible, and not just you can email me, but where in your office can you be accessible? Can you create an open door policy? If you work virtually, could you have office hours where you are on green on Teams or whatever system you use, Slack, whatever, showing that you are available, and then making that a consistent thing. Every Monday from 2 to 3, I'm available, and then encourage people to actually use that time. And then the last one that I'm mentioning specifically is to demonstrate transparency. You have to show people who you are, and that requires a little bit of vulnerability. Well, vulnerability isn't comfortable, but vulnerability is necessary. It's actually the number one way you can show courage and bravery is by being vulnerable. And that vulnerability isn't that you're constantly admitting weakness, although that might be something that you choose to do. It's also, here's how we came to this decision, or here's why I'm asking this of you as, an employee of this organization. That transparency piece is incredibly important for people to know that you can be trusted. Safety really translates into trust, and we want to make sure that you are showing that trust and showing it clearly. So that's safe. I'm going to ask that you take just a moment to go back to your handouts or your notes. And I want you to just write down something that you already do that makes people feel safe. And I want you to write down something you're willing to try. So take just a moment to add to your notes what's something you currently do to make people feel safe around you, and what's something that you are willing to try. If you want to pause this and take a little while. I recommend that. That's a great idea. All right, you've made it safe. That's exciting. But now we have to make it logical. And logical is not just that it makes sense, it's that you are clear with your expectations and you're not the only one who knows the plan, right? So we've all been to that meeting where we struggle with the fact that we don't know how long we're going to be there. We don't know what the agenda is, right? Like, so we've got this meeting on our calendar from 9 to 11, but at 11:30, 12 o'clock every single time we're still there, right? That's not logical. People need to know what's coming and they need to know why it's of value to them. So that's starting with why, and that making sure that people recognize where you're headed will really make a big, big difference. So let's look at a couple specific things that you can do to make things logical. Being clear with those expectations. We're going to be together for 30 minutes, and in those 30 minutes, you're going to learn this, 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 and this, right? Or an email before the meeting that says there are 3 major things that we're going to talk about today. Please come prepared to do so. That's logical. That's Dexter. Hold on. Dex. You got to love working from home, right? Okay. So when we think about, hang on, I'm going to pause. I'll be right back. So I clearly was not clear with my expectations that my dog needed to not bark at that exact moment. All right, being clear with expectations. We must be very clear with what we are expecting of our kid, of our spouse, of our employees, of our entire department. Expectations aren't something that should just live in your head. There's something that should be visible. There's something that should be accessible. There's something that should be known. So when we think about our expectations, it is incredibly important that they be somewhere posted, right? So maybe they're on the door in the break room. Maybe they are emailed out before a meeting, but be clear with your expectations. You also need to think about your different types of humans. So some of us really like to read and process things. Others need to hear it, and others need to experience it. But if every time you're giving information to your team, you are sending it in an email, you're really only reaching one of those groups. So could you record yourself saying it? Could you say it out loud in a meeting and then follow up with an email? Be logical with the fact that you are not delivering all of your information a single way. And then the other one is to create some predictability. You want people to know, okay, our Monday meeting lasts from 9 to 9:30. At 9:31, you will be free to do something else every single time. When we start a meeting, we are going to start with a 2-word check-in. That's a Brene Brown thing. Such a great idea. You know, everybody gets 2 words. You share your 2 words, and then if there needs to be a follow-up, then you follow up with the person that said totally burnt out, right? Like that's a hyphenated word. Or really excited, right? Vacation tomorrow. A 2-word check-in can tell you a lot about what your team is doing, and it creates. I know I'm going to have the opportunity to share something personal, and then we're going to move forward with the professional. Be predictable and be logical. It's not okay to have a plan if you're the only one that knows the plan. All right, so we spent a little time talking about safe and adding to it. Now let's spend a little time adding to logical. Take a moment to go back to your notes and think about, okay, so I know that I need to do X. What's the new thing you're willing to try, or the thing that you already do that you want to add to this list? Okay, this one's by far my favorite. So one of the things that I learned very early on is that if it's not fun, people quit. So as a high school teacher, this is kind of where my fun started. I realized that nobody would want to come to class if we weren't going to have a good time while they were there. They were stuck with me for 85 minutes every single day. I needed to make it fun. But that translated into working with adults, most definitely, because we don't get to have fun. Everything's so serious when you become an adult. Why? It doesn't have to be. And here's the important brain research behind the fun. Our neurons only fire when there is emotion tied to whatever we're learning or doing. So if there is zero emotion evoked, meaning that we are sitting there and they're droning on and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I can't get the hour of my life back ever that this meeting is taking, you are not firing your neurons, which means you are also not remembering what it is that's said in the meeting. So if you were holding a meeting for an hour, you fully expected people to get what you were saying, and yet you didn't evoke any emotion, they will not remember what you said, nor will they care. So it's incredibly important that we make it fun. So what are some ways that you can make it fun? Well, fun can be something as simple as music in the break room. Now, I know we're not all physically together at this point, but maybe you are, maybe you're in a building. Let different groups pick what type of music you play on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Giving incentives for the little things. My friends, I have been giving smelly stickers for no joke 16 years. And in those 16 years, what I have discovered is that people will do much for little. The stickers are not the carrot, quite honestly. The stickers are just the conduit for me to have a conversation with people and say, hey, you're doing a good job. So what incentives might work? Hey, if you're struggling with getting people to come to work on time, then how about you give a $5 gift card if you come to work on time for 2 weeks? It costs you $5 and it increases productivity by X amount, right? It makes a huge, huge difference. And then celebrating the small wins. You can't wait till a project is over to say good job. You've got to take some time to say you nailed that presentation, and I know it's going to create more work for you, but it's going to be worth it. And then the other part of fun is making sure that people are being asked to do things they're good at, right? You hired people because they were brilliant and talented. And what I just realized is I haven't been sharing my screen, so let me do that. You are definitely going to want to celebrate those things that are happening within the space. So what I mean by that is if I have somebody that's really talented in graphic design, but they hate detail work, then I need to make sure that everything that I'm doing with them is not detail work heavy, but creative heavy, right? Or if I have somebody on my team who's really, really good at creating agendas that work, then that needs to be something that they do because it's not only something they're good at, but it's something that they enjoy. So the fun aspect of learning is to make sure that we are allowing people to use their talents, allowing people to laugh out loud, and evoking emotion in everything that we do. So we've done safe, we've done logical. Now we're on to fun. And so take just a moment to write down one or two things that you're willing to try to evoke a little bit of emotion within your workplace or personally. Okay, safe, logical, fun. Memorable. Well, duh, Christy. Of course I want to be memorable. Of course I want people to remember what I said. That's a no-brainer, except that we're often pretty non-memorable, right? Because there's actually a formula to being memorable. And what I mean by memorable is that you are making sure you're following up with people so that they're able to remember what you said. So let's think about that for a second. Making sure that there are check-ins. Let's pretend we've created a project. This project's going to take a total of 6 months. And if you don't check in on that project for the full 6 months, guess what? Nothing's going to get done. So I think about my twins. My twins are 21 now, but when they were in 7th grade, they had a project and they just so happened, I'm not sure how it happened, but they ended up on the same team. Now I have a boy and a girl. They are about as different as night and day. And my boy and girl operate pretty stereotypically boy-girl when it comes to a project. So Chloe was the only girl on the project. The other 3 were boys and one of them was her brother. So what happened is they had a full 6 weeks to do a project in school, right? Great idea. It was a future cities. They were going to create this city and it was going to be fantastic. Well, as you can imagine, here's kind of how it went. Chloe said, we need to do this. The boys said, no, thank you. That continued for 5 of the 6 weeks. In the last week, everybody's in a panic. Nobody is getting anything done. There's stress involved, a lot of tears. And the night before, guess where the project was? In my living room, being done at the last minute. And so I talked to the teacher afterwards and I just said, How would that have gone different if there were some check-ins each week and some milestones to meet? If we want to be memorable, we must check in with people. So I'm a real estate agent and I need to get this contract signed. It needs to be signed on Wednesday. So on Tuesday, I'm going to check in with those folks and I'm going to say, hey, don't forget, we need to sign this contract by Wednesday. Or if I am a doctor and I have prescribed some exercises to my patient, then I'm going to check in with them a week after I prescribe them to say, how is that going? We don't like, as humans, our brains are actually wired to not do the tough stuff. So if we don't check in with people, they're going to avoid the tough stuff. They're not going to do it until they must do it. So in the case of that seventh grade project, I think that translates into every project we do at work as well. If there are no check-ins, people will avoid it until it's done. And it's too late and we're stressed out because we're doing it all at the last minute. So that's one. Circling back for consistency or with consistency is so important. So the circle back is I'm going to check in with you in a week. It's like a check-in, right? I'm going to check in with you in a week, and here are the things that I expect to see. Will make a big difference. Then you're on your own. Best of luck. The safeguards that you have to build in is going to be specific to your circumstance, right? So when I say safeguards, I'm saying that there needs to be a way for people to ask questions that doesn't feel intimidating. There needs to be some preventative measures put in place so that you don't end up at the last minute not having what you need to be successful. Safeguards are predicting what's going to happen that could derail whatever you're doing and making sure that those things are removed. And then the last one's my favorite. I do live in Florida, and in Florida, when it rains, it means it. And so I adhere to the sprinkle, splash, flood, drip, drip, drip philosophy when learning. And when I say learning, guys, we're all learning all day, every day. Some of us are being taught in a way that we remember, and others are not. I'm challenging you to be thoughtful about how you're delivering information so that people will actually remember it. Whether it's just a meeting or a training or whatever, you're not saying things for people to not remember them. You're saying them with the idea that you want them to remember. So sprinkle, splash, flood, drip, drip, drip kind of works like this. When it rains in Florida, you get these big fat drops first. And you know, uh-oh, I better take cover, right? So the sprinkle splash is a lot like the preview to a movie. This is the email before the meeting that says we're going to talk about these three things. It's the text message that says, hey, when you come to the meeting, please bring this and this. It's the communication or the teaser before the big thing happens. So regardless of industry, in healthcare, that would be the you have an appointment tomorrow, please bring these things. Sprinkle splash. The flood is the information. That's the appointment with the doctor. That's the experience that you're training 300 people. That's the opportunity to learn new software. The flood is when you get the bulk of the information. But the problem with a flood is most of the water runs off, right? So how do we fix that? Well, we fix that by making sure that the drip, drip, drip happens too. So the way that we actually absorb the water is the drip, drip, drip off the trees at the end of the storm. So if I've flooded you with information, that's great. But the drip, drip, drip is the follow-up email. It says, here are the three things that we talked about. Or it's the phone call 2 weeks later that says, hey, how's that going? Or it's the returned call that says, hey, you bought the house. Do you love it? The idea here is that you must drip, drip, drip the information if you want people to actually retain it. So what are you doing currently that makes you memorable? Or what are you willing to steal so that you can become more memorable? So take just a moment to add that to your notes. We have moved through all 4 sections and we are adding to memorable. Okay. So safe, logical, fun, and memorable sounds great, Christy. That's lovely. But I have a full-time job. Like, when am I supposed to do this crap? And what's it going to actually look like? Well, that's really what we're going to spend a whole lot of time talking about is the practical. But what we're going to use in order to get there is a very simple action plan. So remember back to the beginning when we talked about analyze, improve, move. Well, if we want to analyze something, we need to answer some questions. What goal am I trying to reach? What practices do I need to change? How am I going to accomplish this goal? And how, if I did, would it change my organization? Right? So, first, you have to think about the analysis of where you are. Then you have to improve upon that situation, right? What practices do I need to start, stop, or continue? What do I need to do differently so that I get a different result? And then the move is really, is it working? Am I happy with the results? Is this something that I think is going to do well? I'm not sure, right? So, the idea here is that we want you to take the time to think through where you need to start, because the reality is you cannot do it all at once. It is not this is not something that you just change overnight, because you really can only change one thing at a time. My son in school, one of the things that we probably said to him 1,000 times was, Jackson, how do you eat an elephant? Because what would happen to him is that he would get overwhelmed with his expectations outside of school, and he would feel like he couldn't be successful. And so we'd say, okay, Jackson, how do you eat an elephant? And he'd say, one bite at a time. He'd get very angry at us for it, but it stuck because he started to realize, I don't have to do it all. I just have to do one thing. And what I've learned over time with that analogy of eating the elephant is that the easiest way to eat an elephant is with others. So, how can you find an accountability partner, whether that's at work or at home, who can help you with this process? What might that look like? Could it be that you start meeting with somebody once a week and say, hey, I tried this thing and I think it worked. I'm really not sure. I'd love your opinion on it. So, although I don't anticipate that you've completely created your action plan right now, this is something that I'm going to challenge you to work on, because if you don't decide that you're going to change something, then you heard this, it was lovely, and you're like, yay, I'm going to be more safe or logical in my interactions, and zero things are going to change. So, my challenge to you is to decide on the one thing and then get somebody to hold you accountable for that one thing, that one bite of that elephant that you're taking, so that you can actually see change. So I have one slide left to share with you, and that's next steps. So here's what I'd love for you to attempt based on your experience here today. The first one is to choose an area of focus. You cannot focus on everything at once. So, what's the one thing that you're going to try and do differently? Maybe it's that you're going to learn people's names, like my friend in real estate. Or maybe it's that you are going to actually have a plan for your 30-minute one on one meetings with your team. Or maybe it's that you are going to start dripping information after you've given it. I don't know what your one thing is, but pick one and then try it. It's not enough to just say, oh, I picked one. Now you have to do something with it. So try that one thing. Let me know how it goes. Here's the hardest, and I haven't said this yet. I saved the best for last. We tend to try something once and say, that was terrible. I will never do it again. Here's the reality. You have to do something at least 18 times in front of others to master it. So if you said, I'm going to learn people's names, and then you tried it and you completely forgot, you can't just not try it again. You've got 17 more times of practice before you master it. Or maybe your thing is that you were going to set an agenda for your next meeting, and you set the agenda thinking it would only take 30 minutes and it actually took 45. That doesn't mean anything other than you've got 17 more times before you've mastered it. So please give yourself a little bit of grace and recognize that you're not going to get it 100% right the first time or the second time or the fifth time. You will start to get it right by the 18th time. And then this is the exciting one. I want you to prepare for awesomeness, because awesomeness is going to happen and you are going to create it. So get excited about what this is going to look like, because it will change all your human interactions and make some really, really great stuff happen. So if you want more information, or you would just like to go a little deeper, my book will help you with that, but so will I. So the rest of this course is going to break down what I mean when I say safe, logical, fun, and memorable in practical ways that you can actually utilize. We're going to talk about all kinds of things, but but those all kinds of things are going to be directly practical to you. If you click on that QR reader, it does take you to my website, and on there you will also find opportunities for a free consultation if you're interested, or just an opportunity to brainstorm a little bit about what you're doing, what's working, and what isn't. So take just a moment, if you would, to look at those things. And then I want to challenge you one more time. Whatever you came up with, tell somebody. Don't hold it in. Make sure somebody knows exactly what it is that you're planning to do with that information. I am going to what by when. So one of my favorite new ways to make sure that things get done is the W3. W3 is who will do what by when. So who will do what by when? I will learn how to, or I will attempt to use an agenda at my next one-on-one by the end of next week. I will become, you are the who in this, I think, right? Maybe it's your team, but I will shift the way I interact with people by taking the time to do a 2-word check-in at the beginning of each meeting by our next meeting, which is in 2 weeks. I don't know what your W3 is, but I do know that it'll make a big difference. So I thank you for your time. I thank you for the opportunity to learn with and alongside you, and I'm so excited to see where this takes you. So make sure that you invest in yourself a little bit and think about, okay, I'm going to make these interactions just a little bit more what? I believe that you have to do all 4 all the time in order to be truly successful, but that doesn't mean you have to focus on all 4 from the beginning. Pick one and then go and choose to be awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today. I cannot wait to continue this process with you.